the weaver of winds and the keeper of tomes. The house in Pyeongchang-dong exhaled the scent of old paper, lemon polish, and a silence so profound it was almost a sound in itself. Park Hyun-woo, 69 years retired from his professorship in Korean literature, moved through its rooms with the quiet precision of a curator. Late autumn light, weak and golden, slanted through the window of the study, illuminating the spine of the poetry collection he held, a volume he and his late wife, Minji, had read aloud to each other countless times. Her reading glasses still lay on the small lacquer table beside her favourite armchair, as if she had merely stepped away for a moment. 6 years. 6 years. And the moment had stretched into an eternity of suspended animation. He settled into his own worn leather chair, the familiar comfort a small solace. The ritual began, the careful opening of the book, the faint rustle of pages, his low voice murmuring verses that spoke of fleeting beauty and enduring love. Minji's presence was a palpable entity in the room, woven into the warp and weft of the fading brocade curtains, nestled in the precise alignment of books on the floor-to-ceiling shelves, a system she had devised and he had meticulously maintained. The chime of his laptop interrupted the verse. Junso, his son, his face pixelated from halfway across the world in Canada. Abeoji, Junso's voice, tinny through the speakers. "You're well?" "Yes, yes, son. And you? The children?" Hyun-woo's smile felt like a mask he donned for these calls, the usual pleasantries, then the gentle prodding. "Abeoji, I was thinking, Professor Kim from your department mentioned an alumni gathering, or perhaps that new book club at the community centre." Hyun-woo deflected with practised ease. "Ah, these old bones prefer quiet evenings, Junso. Besides, I have my books. They're company enough." He gestured vaguely at the walls lined with them. Junso's sigh was almost inaudible. "All right, Abeoji, just take care of yourself. Saranghai. You too, son. Tell the little ones their grandfather sends his love." The screen went dark. The silence rushed back in, heavier now, tinged with a familiar ache of loneliness that Hyun-woo refused to fully acknowledge. He was not lonely. He was preserving. A few weeks later, duty more than desire led Hyun-woo to a rare manuscript viewing at his old university library. The air inside was cool, reverent, smelling of aged paper and binding glue. He moved slowly along the glass cases, peering at delicate, centuries-old poetry scrolls. He found himself beside a woman, also absorbed in a particularly fine example of Goryeo-era calligraphy. She was perhaps a few years younger than him, her silver-threaded black hair styled in a soft bob. Her eyes, when she briefly glanced up, were observant, intelligent. "The Hanji," she murmured, almost to herself, her voice low and pleasant. "The way the ink has settled into the fibres, it breathes." Hyun-woo, usually reticent with strangers, found himself responding. "Indeed, the longevity of such paper is remarkable. It holds the poet's breath across centuries." She turned to him then, a small, thoughtful smile on her lips. "Lee Soo-yeon," she introduced herself. "I work with textiles, bojagi mostly. The old ways of making paper, the natural dyes, they fascinate me." Park Hyun-woo. He was surprised by the ease of the conversation that followed, a brief, insightful discussion about the intersection of material and text, art and literature. When they parted, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a warmth that had nothing to do with the library's heating system. They encountered each other again by chance at a university lecture on Seijo poetry. This time, So-yeon initiated tea afterwards. They found a quiet, traditional tea house in Insadong, the air fragrant with jujube and cinnamon. As the afternoon light softened, their conversation deepened. So-yeon spoke of her former work as an art therapist, of finding solace and expression in the meticulous craft of bojagi, the Korean wrapping cloths. Hyun-woo, in turn, found himself speaking of literature with a passion he hadn't shared with anyone but Minji for years. He was captivated by her quiet intelligence, the gentle empathy in her eyes. She seemed to listen not just to his words, but to the spaces between them. So-yeon, for her part, was intrigued by his profound knowledge, the underlying sensitivity beneath his reserved exterior. A cautious, intellectual intimacy began to form, as delicate and tentative as the first unfurling of a spring bud. After several such meetings, Hyun-woo, in a gesture that surprised even himself, invited Soo-yeon to his home in Pyeongchang-dong for tea. He wanted to show her his collection of first editions, a part of his world he rarely shared. Soo-yeon arrived on a crisp late autumn afternoon. She was initially awed by the sheer volume of books, the library-like atmosphere of the house. "It's magnificent, Hun-woo-si," she said, her voice touched with genuine admiration. "A true sanctuary for words." But as he led her through the rooms, a subtle shift occurred in her expression. He showed her Minji's study, untouched since her passing, her favourite fountain pen lying beside an open, unwritten-in notebook, a stack of research papers neatly piled. The teacups they used were from Minji's cherished Celadon set. Everywhere Soo-yeon looked, she saw the indelible imprint of another woman, a life perfectly preserved, almost mummified. She felt like an archaeologist stumbling into a pharaoh's tomb, a sacred space where the air was too thin for the living. Hyun-woo, lost in his memories, pointed out Minji's favourite passages in books, her elegant annotations in the margins. He was sharing, yes, but it felt more like he was curating an exhibition of his past, with Minji as the revered central exhibit. There was no space for Soo-yeon to place even a metaphorical teacup of her own. His internal monologue ran its course. She has Minji's keen eye for beauty, but Minji's hands they held a pen with such grace. The comparisons were constant, involuntary, a silent judgment against which no new acquaintance could prevail. So-yeon, an artist whose life was about creation and flow, felt an invisible barrier rising. "Your love for her, it's very present," she said softly, trying to find the right words. "She was the other half of my soul," Hyun-woo replied, his gaze distant, fixed on a framed photograph of Minji that sat on the mantelpiece, a youthful, smiling Minji. The following week, Soo-yeon brought a small gift. It was a jagi she had made, a beautiful square of silk dyed in subtle shades of indigo and persimmon, meticulously stitched. "I thought perhaps it could cover that stack of journals on your desk," she offered, her smile hopeful. "To bring a little softness." Hyun-woo admired its craftsmanship, the way the colours shifted in the light. "It's exquisite, Soo-yeon-si, truly." He took it from her, then, after a moment's hesitation, opened a drawer in the antique writing desk. "It's too lovely to risk getting ink on it. And Minji, she had a specific way she liked the desk arranged." He placed the bojagi carefully inside, among other neatly stored items. Soo-yeon's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. She saw it later, the bojagi, when he briefly opened the drawer to find a letter opener. Folded, unused, a splash of vibrant life interred in the dimness. When she suggested they try a new, critically acclaimed restaurant in Gangnam that her friend Jien had recommended, Hyun-woo demurred. "Ah, those modern places are so noisy. There's a quiet little Hanjeong-sik place near the university. Minji and I used to go there often. The owner still remembers her favourite dishes." He did accept her invitation to visit her studio, a bright, airy space in Yeonhui-dong, a stark contrast to his own home. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating colourful skeins of thread, pots of simmering natural dyes, and works in progress that seemed to hum with vibrant energy. Hun-woo looked around, a polite but slightly bewildered expression on his face. The organised chaos of creation, the earthy smells of indigo and gardenia, seemed to overwhelm him. "Your work is very expressive," he commented, picking up a piece of Rami fabric dyed in earthy tones. He then gestured to a complex, abstract bojagi hanging on the wall. "These contemporary forms, Minji always said true artistry lies in honouring tradition. She found some modern art rather unrefined." The comment, though perhaps not intended to wound, stung Soo-yeon. It felt as if Minji's ghost was not just an inhabitant of his house, but also the arbiter of taste in hers. "How can I breathe in a house that holds its breath for someone else?" Soo-yeon thought, her heart heavy. She tried, gently, to understand the depth of his bond with Minji. "She must have been an extraordinary woman, Hyun-woo-si," she said one afternoon, as they walked through the nearly bare trees of a university park, the winter air crisp around them. Hun-woo's descriptions of Minji were always reverent, idealized. He spoke of her intellect, her grace, her perfect understanding of him, her unwavering support for his work. There were never any anecdotes of shared laughter over a silly mistake, or disagreements navigated, or the mundane, everyday textures of a long life lived together. It was as if he were reciting a eulogy, not sharing memories of a wife. Soo-yeon realized with a growing sense of despair that she wasn't hearing about a woman, but a legend. a muse whose pedestal was too high, too sacred for any living person to approach. Her friend, Choi Ji-eun, a pragmatic retired journalist, had been blunter during one of their recent phone calls. "So, he's a living monument to a dead love, and you're supposed to what, Soo-yeon? Be the fresh flowers laid at the base each week? You deserve your own garden, not just a spot in his memorial." So-yeon had sighed. "It's not that simple, Ji-eun. He's a good man. Lonely." "Lonely by choice? It sounds like," Ji-eun had retorted. "Be careful you don't become another perfectly preserved memory in his collection." The turning point came when Soo-yeon, with a surge of hope that perhaps sharing her world more fully might bridge the gap, invited Hyun-woo to an exhibition of contemporary bojagi by a celebrated young artist. The gallery was stark white, the works vibrant, abstract, playing with light and unconventional materials like translucent silk organza and stiffened hanji. Hyun-woo walked through the space slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. He tried to engage, to find words of appreciation, but his comments were stilted, his brow furrowed in a way that suggested confusion rather than contemplation. "Interesting use of asymmetry," he offered, looking at a large piece composed of jagged overlapping shapes in fiery reds and oranges. Then he added, almost as an apology, Minji had such an eye for true beauty, for the harmony in traditional patterns. She collected reproductions of Joseon dynasty palace bojagi, the craftsmanship, the symbolism, so profound. His words, meant perhaps as a neutral observation, landed like a quiet dismissal. In that moment, Soo-yeon saw the chasm between them with painful clarity. His world, and Minji's, was one of established canons, of revered traditions. Her world, the world of contemporary art, of evolving forms, was something alien to him, something to be measured against a perfected past and found wanting. Her own passion felt subtly invalidated, her artistic spirit gently rebuffed. The confrontation, when it came, was as quiet and sorrowful as the late winter evening that enveloped Hyun-woo's study. Snow had begun to fall, soft, silent flakes against the dark window panes. The only warmth in the room came from a small desk lamp, its glow illuminating the endless rows of books that seemed to press in on them, witnesses to a life long concluded. A quiet tension had been building for weeks, an unspoken acknowledgement of the impasse they had reached. So-yeon sat in the armchair opposite Minji's, the one Hyun-woo rarely offered to guests. She had been silent for a long time, watching the snow, her hands clasped in her lap. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but firm, each word chosen with care. "Hyun-woo see," she began, her gaze meeting his. "Your love for Minji is a profound and beautiful thing. I see it in every corner of this house, in every word you speak of her. It's a complete world, Hyun-woo see, a finished story, perfectly bound." She paused, took a steadying breath. "And I find there is no space left, no space for a new story to begin, no air for it to breathe, no room for me to be truly seen, for us to begin." Hyun-woo's face, etched with the lines of quiet sorrow he usually kept so well hidden, crumpled slightly. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Soo-yeon continued, her voice laced with a sadness that mirrored his own. "I feel as though I am always tiptoeing around her memory, afraid to disturb the perfect order you've created. I cannot live as a guest in someone else's past, Hyun-woo see, no matter how beautiful that past may be. I need to be a chapter in my own story, not just a footnote in yours." He was visibly pained. "Soo-yeon see, I never intended." He finally found his voice, though it was raspy. "My feelings for Minji, they do not negate what I am beginning to feel for you." But the words felt hollow, even to him. He offered no concrete change, no suggestion of altering the shrine he inhabited, the carefully curated atmosphere of Minji's enduring presence. His gaze drifted around the room, lingering on Minji's empty chair, her books, the faint scent of her favourite jasmine tea that he sometimes imagined still clung to the air. How could he disturb this? How could he dismantle the very architecture of his grief, which had, over 6 years, become the architecture of his life? Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all those solitary years, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I understand what you are saying, but to change this house, these memories, it feels like dimming her light, erasing her. I don't know if I'm capable of that. Perhaps," he looked directly at Soo-yeon, his eyes filled with a deep, helpless sorrow, "perhaps I am only meant to be the keeper of her flame." The admission hung in the air, as final and irrevocable as the falling snow outside. Their path together, barely begun, had reached its gentle, inevitable end. The parting was sorrowful but respectful, devoid of anger or recrimination, just a quiet acceptance of an unbridgeable gap. Winter slowly relinquished its hold, and the first tentative signs of spring began to touch Seoul. The air grew milder, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of renewal. Soo-yeon, with the steadfast support of her friend Jien, found solace and expression in her art. She immersed herself in her Yeonhui-dong studio, the rhythmic work of her hands a balm to her spirit. She began a new series of bojagi, not with the bright, hopeful colours she often favoured, but with naturally dyed fabrics in muted tones of grey, deep indigo, and earthy ochres. Yet, woven into each piece were surprising threads of unexpected light, a sliver of silver, a filament of pale gold, like resilience glinting through sorrow. She called the series The Space Between Breaths, exploring themes of memory, release, and the quiet beauty found in empty spaces, spaces that allow for new growth. Word of her unique approach spread, and she started teaching a small, sought-after workshop on natural dyeing and mindful stitching, sharing her skills and her quiet strength with others. Hyunwoo, meanwhile, retreated further into the Pyeongchang-dong house. The silence, once a comforting companion, now felt heavier, imbued with a fresh layer of loss. Minji's presence was still there, but now it was overlaid with the faint, fading scent of Soo-yeon's quiet departure. He found himself wandering the rooms, the books offering less solace than before. During one of his video calls, Junso, perceptive despite the distance, sensed his father's deeper melancholy. After sharing news of a small architectural project of his own that had received recognition, he paused, then asked gently, "Abeoji, have you written anything lately? You used to write such beautiful essays about the seasons, remember? Minji Halmeoni always said you had the soul of a poet." The question, unexpected, stirred something dormant within Hyunwoo. He hadn't written anything personal, anything beyond academic papers, since Minji's death. Writing had been a shared landscape, and without her to read his words, the wellspring had seemed to dry up. Days later, a pale spring sun filtered through the study window. Hyunwoo stood before Minji's desk, her meticulously arranged pens, her still-open notebook. For years, this space had been sacrosanct. He looked at her empty chair for a long time. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached out and cleared a small section on the large shared desk, a space that had been covered with Minji's research notes on ancient poetry. He found a new, high-quality notebook, its pages creamy and inviting, a notebook he'd bought years ago with some vague intention, then stored away. He retrieved a fountain pen, one Minji had gifted him on their 20th anniversary, its ink long dry. He refilled it. He sat not in her chair, but in his own, facing the cleared space, the blank page. He looked out the window at a plum tree in the small walled garden, its branches just beginning to show the faintest blush of delicate blossoms. He uncaps the pen. The silence of the room was different now, not entirely empty, but expectant. He hesitated then, with a deep breath that felt like the first true inhalation in years. He touched pen to paper. The first word remained unwritten for a long moment, but the intention was clear. A tentative, solitary step towards finding his own voice again, in his own present. Not a grand transformation, but the quiet, fragile beginning of one.